Good afternoon, Jeff of all trades. All right, so I had a comment on my original DIY cure in place pipe lining video asking for the follow-up part 2, and it's been about a year since we completed the process, and I can say with a little bit of pride, I suppose, that the process worked beautifully and it appears to be a permanent solution. So it's been long enough that I've got some passion fruit vines growing in here, but it's bone dry where the original leak was. And down here you should be able to see the fitting. That's where my Polaris normally hooks into when it's running. Got a little bit of sediment on the bottom of the pool there. I apologize. It's not particularly pretty. But yeah. So part 2, as I explained in the first video, we used some E6000 to attach just some real basic cotton fabric. I believe it's like an interliner for quilting, not particularly thick, but a real thin cotton fabric to that 1.5" PVC hose. And I never was able to really solve the air leak at the barb fitting, and so what we did is I just left an air compressor attached to the whole setup for about 3 days after we applied the epoxy and inserted into the pipe. And the air compressor just would periodically refill the pressure when the pressure got too low, and so on and so forth. I do have a couple of recommendations for you as I'm taking you through the garage here and see if I can find my original contraption. There it is. There we go. I do have a couple of things I would add. Now, in the design of this apparatus, my original intent was to invert the hose and then fill it up with epoxy and then blow it out, very much like the commercial liners. But the 1.5" PVC drain hose that you can buy was not really pliable enough. I think probably could have used the same material at a much larger diameter had it been like a 4" hose and pulled it off, but in an 1.5" it was just almost impossible to invert, and so we just clamped it on here and then slid it into the pipe with the epoxy all over the fabric, and left it connected to the Schrader valve under air pressure for a few days. You can see the chlorine, and the pool was not very kind to this cheap Harbor Freight air fitting, but it did its job very well, and we ended up with a very nice result. Now, in the original video, I said that we were going to insert a tool into the pipe to cut the hose and then pull out the cut plug and leave the hose and the epoxy and the fabric in place. Well, we tried that. I tried using a hole saw on like a 2-foot extension on my drill, and that really didn't work. We were able to get it fit down there, and it wasn't working. And as we were finagling with it, the E6000 that we used to secure the fabric to the hose let go, and so we just left the epoxy impregnated cotton and the epoxy itself in the pipe, and the PVC drain hose came right back out. So if you had several of these that you needed doing, I guess you could just reuse that reuse that PVC hose. Now, as far as the design of this apparatus, because I did not invert the hose, I do not need all of this space up here, so you can save a lot of money on this big street elbow and then all of these reducer fittings. Now, if I were going to do this again, what I would likely do is chop this off right here and then apply this same little 3/4 inch threaded end cap with an air valve bodged onto it to the end of this and make something that's a lot smaller and a lot less unwieldy. This was fine. I was able to orient it so the elbow was facing up, so, you know, kind of the flotation and the air kind of kept everything where it was, but it would have been much easier had we just had a small piece, you know, just a small piece here on the end and our air fitting right here, and we can discard all of this other material. You know, having a little air compressor, I happen to have a couple of little portable air compressors. I just set the gauge to 15 pounds and ran an extension cord out there with you know, the plugs off the ground just in case it rained, and put a tarp, kind of set up a tarp over the air compressor to keep it from getting wet in the rain if that were to happen, and just let it sit and hold pressure for about 3 days until I was absolutely sure that the epoxy would have cured. And like I say, you saw the result. That pipe is not leaking. Now, a year later, I still have to patch that concrete, which I haven't gotten around to, but that should be happening later this week. So maybe there'll even be a part 3.